Hi, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. There was a period of time where I wanted to be the one who decided to go for it. And so this is one of my favorite topics to talk to you about today. And I am really excited to help you be the one who decides to go for it. So let's go ahead and get started. What would it be like if you knew the hidden mechanism to achieve any goal every single time? I mean, that would be pretty exciting, wouldn't it? This is exactly how I felt as I started to unlock this for myself. And all I've wanted to do since that time is to help other people understand it for themselves. I think one of the really big reasons why I want to share it with people is because, I really believe that it's time to step into a new economy. And what I'm talking about when I talk about a new economy, I'm not talking about a global economy or even your local economy. I'm really talking about your economy. And you know what? I think one of the reasons that people are ready to step into this are really three lifestyle desires. So I want to go over them with you. The first lifestyle desire that I believe everyone is looking for is they want to be free of any financial concern. What would it be like if you didn't have to worry about money when you woke up or when you went to bed at night, or even when you were doing things throughout the day? It feels so good when you don't have to worry about that or be concerned about it, that the flow of money is coming in all the time. Another lifestyle desire that I think people are looking for is they want to wake up every morning enthused about how they're going to spend their day. When is the last time you woke up and your feet were going, even before you woke up, you were just so excited about what you were going to do that day? This is how my life began to change as I began to find ways to go for it for myself, that I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning instead of grinding it out. There is such a difference. And when you really know the difference, you really want to choose how to wake up every morning. Another lifestyle desire that I think people are looking for is they want to enjoy daily relationships with other men and women who are upbeat, enthusiastic, and creatively productive. It feels so amazing when you're around people that have a goal or a dream and you're working together toward it. There was a period of time I was with people and it was just a grind for them to come to work. And I didn't really like that. And so I created a way for myself to have the kind of lifestyle that I wanted. I think it all can come down to this one sentence that Alvin Toffler talks about in a book called Future Shock. To really take a look at where we are in society, I think he put it really, really well. I read this book actually before Y2K, so it was a while ago, but I do remember this. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Isn't that such the truth today? I mean, think about when this was written and everything we've gone through over the last few years. You really see that it's people who can adapt to the things that are changing. Well, I want to share with you a little bit about who I am. My name is Angie Tomlinson, and I am a natural laws expert and a continuous student. I love learning, and I really have learned to love learning about me. And so I want to help you begin to understand that for yourself. Being a student and studying yourself, I think, is one of the greatest gifts you could ever give yourself. I am a licensed facilitator and coach. I have built a 7- and 8-figure coaching business. That's pretty exciting because, in my own growth, I set up a 7-figure coaching business for myself. And you know what? I've spent some time helping others build theirs, and we built an 8-figure coaching business. And so I'm so excited to be here to share with you how you can get there as well. I always surround myself with high-level mentors and coaches for my own personal growth. I think this is so important when you're growing and you're learning and expanding. You want to be with people that are also doing that for themselves. So I believe you're in the right place right now. Another thing that I want to tell you about myself is I am happily and blissfully married for 33 years to a wonderful gentleman, and I have 3 beautiful children. So as I've been growing and developing, that has been very important to me is family. And I'm always finding ways how to bring what I want in the world and maintain a healthy and happy marriage and family. My purpose and vision is I want to support people. I want to support people using the power of their mind for peak performance and have a spiritual understanding as you're doing it. I think sometimes we get so into the spirituality that we don't get to have the things that we want, or we spend so much time in pushing and pushing that we don't enjoy what we have. So to bring these two things together and using our imagination in a peak performance is something I'm very excited about. I also help people turn their annual income or the yearly income into a monthly income. I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about your annual income. What would it be like if you could use that or have that every single month? I mean, that would be quite amazing, wouldn't it? Well, that's something that I did, but we're going to get to that in a few moments. I guide people in the goal achieving and real living and proving success principles. I think it's so important to understand that there are these beautiful success principles that are worth living. They really are. And I'm not talking about some theory. I want to talk about the kind of lifestyle that you can have in achieving your goals. I coach and mentor people to understand their dynamic potential and personal development. I think there's such a big misunderstanding right now about personal development and professional development. Professional development is when you learn about something, and personal development is when you learn when you are being it. And I think so many people approach personal development like professional development. We have a lot of people who know a lot of stuff. We are really much into this, I think, as a society about information. And so this brings me to my last point, and I'm pretty expressive about it. So I hope this is helpful to you, but I have a really strong desire to shift away from information and establish transformation, especially in the coaching industry and people who want to coach and help people. We are past the age of information. People know all kinds of stuff. What I believe people are really looking for is transformation. So if you're here looking to improve your coaching, or you're here because you want to improve your own life, I can tell you this: it has very little to do with information, but it has a lot to do with what you do with the information to create transformation in your life. So before we get started, what I would love for you to do is just take a moment and write down your goal really clearly. So the person that's showing you this video, if they want to just stop a moment and just give you a few seconds to write out your goal really clearly, just write it out in a sentence. I want to give you some statistics that are kind of startling. The first one is 13% of society has a goal. 13% of society. And if you think about that, with 8 billion people in our populace right now, and you think about only 13% of those has a goal. Well, what are the other 87% doing? It is astounding to me to think about what people are doing with their life. And I know I was caught in that 87% as well. And as I began to understand for myself that I have a goal, and it's very, very clear, all I want to do is help other people get their goal and understand their goal as well. Here's another startling statistic. Only 5% of society has a goal clearly written down. So, hey, we've moved into the 5% club together. How amazing is that? The next one is only 3% of society has a goal and work toward it every day. Can you imagine that? Only 3% of society has a goal and work on it every day. A lot of times people just think that it's somewhere out there, but they don't really work toward it every day. And here's the most startling statistic of them all, is only 1% of society achieves their desired goal. Only 1%. You've heard of the 1% club? Well, this is what it's pertaining to. And so when you think of the idea of a 1% of society achieves their goal, man, you really want to get to the bottom of that. But here's the really great thing about it, is that there's so much opportunity for improvement, right? You can get very excited about that. So where are you at in relationship to your goal? What I mean by that is, let's say that your goal is 20,000 a month, but currently you're at 5. Or let's say you want a better relationship, however, you can't find one. Or you want more clients, or you only have a few or none. I want better health, yet I can't start. So what would it take to achieve transformation? This was a question I had for myself. And as I began to unfold it for myself, I realized one important thing is that small things make perfection. If you want to bring what you see in your mind into reality, you've got to understand it's small things. I often share this quote with people, death by 1,000 cuts. Well, it's success by 1,000 awarenesses. Many times we have this idea, but we don't understand all the steps that it's going to take to get there. And so this is learning to do small things. Small things make perfection. But guess what? Perfection is no small thing. You know, I really think when we start working with small things and we start perfecting them, we really understand that to bring that simplification, it's very, very complex. And so if you're somebody here today that really wants to help people or has a coaching or a consulting business, you really understand that you are bringing simplicity to a very complex situation. You're making it simple for another. It's learning to do small things in a big way every day. And this is where I think most of us miss the boat. We try and do a really big thing in a small way every day. So what gets in the way for most of us then? Well, here's one of the first lessons that I ever learned, and it is order is heaven's first law. This was written by Alexander Pope on an essay on man. So in order for us to have this beautiful life that we want, there has to be some sort of order to it. And when you get into this heavenly state, you're in that orderly state. Or if you start working in an orderly state, you will get into the heavenly state. Another great lesson that I learned was from a beautiful mentor of mine, and I always give homage to him, but his name was Bob Proctor. You may have heard of him. When I learned some things from Bob Proctor, my life began to change and it began to unfold. Well, Bob had a mentor, Earl Nightingale, and Earl Nightingale said, success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. And sometimes in that progression, as we go along, we learn some lessons out of order. And sometimes those lessons appear to be failures, but they're not failures. And so sometimes I didn't know how to deal with a failure until I started understanding that the failure was actually the triggering mechanism for success. You see, there's this wonderful natural law that I learned that changed everything around for me. And that law is called the law of polarity, the law of opposites. So if I can begin to have a conversation with myself and I say, listen, it just is, there is no meaning about something until I put meaning in it. If I see it over here, I could just as easily see it towards the opposite. Which one feels better? You see, in order for you to understand an inside of something, you have to know there's an outside. And to be able to understand that there's an up, you've got to understand that there's a down. And so there is always a polarity to everything. And we have to know something to know something else. So this was a really great lesson that I learned, is that success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I'm landing on it. I just may not know the meaning of it that it has for me in my life. Another great lesson that I learned is that there's 2 secrets of success. And I remember thinking, wow, there's only 2? And how do I not know the 2? Well, let me tell you what they are. The first one is you need to know where you are. And the second, you need to know where you're going and head in that direction. I remember thinking, those are the 2 secrets of success: know where you are and know where you're wanting to go. And I started thinking about that. And I thought, well, if that's so easy, then why are so many of us stuck? And so I started thinking, maybe it's the type of goal that I've been going after. You know, I would choose a goal and then I wouldn't be able to make it, and I would change it, and I would do this over and over again. And I just couldn't seem to achieve the goal. And what I found is that it has very little to do with the goal. Now, don't get me wrong, goals are very important, but it has little to do with where you're going. The problem really lies in understanding where you're at. You see, we have these hidden things called paradigms. Now, I had heard of the word paradigm, but I had never studied it for myself. I didn't really even know how it was showing up in my life. So let's take a look at what a paradigm is. Well, a paradigm is a multitude of habits and behaviors. Just to personalize it a little bit, I'm going to change the wording on the screen for you. A paradigm is a multitude of my habits and my behaviors. It's a mental program that has almost exclusive control over my habitual behaviors, and almost all of my behaviors are habitual. It is the way that I see the world. Now, here's the most amazing thing about paradigms is that, yes, they are a multitude of habits, but guess what? They are other people's habits that have been passed down from one generation to the next. I remember thinking, wow, the way that I see the world is really something that other people have taught me. We're programmed two ways. One, genetically. That's why we look like our family members. And the second is environmentally, the way we were taught to see the world. And sometimes the way we've been taught to see the world, we've outgrown that paradigm. We've outgrown that idea. I'm just going to give you a simple little illustration of this. It's kind of a silly story, but it's good. There's a young couple that's married, and the husband is making dinner. He's making a ham dinner. And the new wife, notices that he's cutting the ends of the ham off. And she says, "Why do you cut the ends of the ham off?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. It has something to do with the way you cook it." She found about that. Well, that would all the juices would run out. That reasoning doesn't work out. And so she says, "Well, who taught you that?" And he says, "Well, my mom did." So off they go to mother's house. And she says, "Why do you cut the ends of the ham off?" She says, "Oh, I don't know. My mother always did it, so I do it." So off we go to grandmother's house. "Why do you cut the ends of the ham off?" And she says, she pulls out this old ratty pan and she says, "This is the pan that I like to cook hams in. It's just the hams usually are too big, so I have to cut the ends of the ham off." Now, that might seem like a bit of a ridiculous story being passed down from one generation to the next, but I can tell you we have very similar things when it comes to money and relationships and how we see ourselves in the world. So here's the question that I had. How do you know if you have a paradigm? I remember the answer to that kind of shocked me. It is, you take a look at your results. And I remember thinking, well, how do results happen? Don't results just happen? Well, there's another great natural law that I didn't know about, and this law is called the law of cause and effect. Many of us witness an effect, but we may not know the cause of that idea. And so we're guessing many times about the effect, but for every effect, there is a cause. And so how do you know if you don't like the effect? How do you know what to do about it? Well, I thought, well, it must be, I'll change my behavior. And so I started with that idea. I'll change my behavior to change my paradigm, to get different results. So let's use something kind of basic understanding. Let's say you want to get in shape. And so you get yourself a gym membership, you pack your bag, you make some time for yourself, and you start going to the gym. And sure enough, as you begin to change your behavior, guess what? You change your results. But if anything gets in the way of that behavior, you'll let that go and go right back to what you've always done. Same thing with all of us. You see, it's not about changing behaviors that will change. It's about understanding, how do we change the paradigm? So remember, a paradigm is our habitual thoughts that control all of our behaviors, and all of our behaviors are habitual. So we've got to start with the paradigm. So let's take a look when we change the paradigm, when we change the identity. As soon as we do that, you know what happens? We begin to have different behaviors. And I can tell you this, they are effortless. And when you have those effortless behaviors, you get results, and these are permanent results. They feel really, really natural. You see, if we don't start with our thoughts, no amount of skill or behavior modification will change the result. We must start with the paradigm. So here's the multi-million-dollar question. How do you change a paradigm? Well, there's two ways I want to go over. One is what's called an emotional impact. This is where we have something in our life that shows up, and quite frankly, it sometimes is negative. I had an emotional impact that happened to me in 2007. My father, who was 61, was killed by a train. It was just an accident. But that emotional impact on my life changed the way I saw life going forward from then on. It changed the way I interacted with my family. It changed the way how I just saw myself in the world. Emotional impacts sometimes are really heartbreaking and sometimes very negative. They can look like a loss of a job, a loss of relationship, a loss of life, loss of your health. And these emotional impacts begin to force you to make changes. And that's not always fun. But sometimes emotional impacts come at times where you're not even sure how they do it. Take my friend Georgia, for example. My friend Georgia wanted to get in shape. She had wanted to do yoga, and she kept starting and stopping, but she really wanted to get into shape. And one day, Georgia went grocery shopping with her mother. Her mother was quite a bit older, and she wanted a cart to push. So Georgia got the cart. She said, "Oh, Mom, I'll push it." And she says, "No, I want to push it. It helps stabilize me when I walk." And all of a sudden, Georgia projected herself into the future, and she knew she didn't want a cart to stabilize her as she walked. And so she made this committed decision right then, and she is in shape, and she's still in shape to this day. Emotional, or some of these impacts like that, emotional impacts like Georgia, she told me the story and it didn't do a thing for me. Why did it work for Georgia and not for me? Well, that's why they're so unpredictable, because each of us are thinking about different things all the time. That's why two people can start something and one finishes it and the other one doesn't. It's not an emotional impact. Another way that we can change a paradigm besides emotional impact is through a constant spaced repetition. This is where we give ourselves an idea or a command and we get emotionally involved in it and we begin to act in that way. Let's take a look at some areas of our life, some areas that our paradigm has enormous influence over our life and doesn't allow for those changes in our life. Let's just take a look at our perception. Our perception is how we see the world. Sometimes when I'm just coming to a stop, like I keep coming up against a problem and I just can't get over it. Sometimes if I write that problem out on a piece of paper, like get it totally out of my system, and I put it in the middle of a table, let's say, and I pretend that I'm different people sitting around that table looking at that problem. Even though Bob has been gone for a little over a year, sometimes I pretend that he's sitting at the table with me and I'll ask him, "How would you look at that?" And sometimes just the way he looks at things will shift my whole perception of things. Even though both of my parents are gone, I'll do the same thing with my parents. Sometimes I even put Oprah Winfrey there because I just love the way that she looks at herself and in the world of creation. And that will just shift the way that I look at things. Another area that our paradigm has enormous influence over is our use of time. And I will hear people say over and over again when they want something, "I just don't have enough time. There's not enough time in the day. I wish I had more time. I need to manage my time better." You can't manage time. You know what? All of us get the same amount of time. It doesn't matter if you're a high producing executive or a bum on the bench. We're all given the same amount of time. It really isn't about time. It's about managing the activities that we're involved in. And some of the activities are such a habit that we aren't able to embrace new ones. Another area of our life that our paradigm has enormous influence over is our creativity. I will hear people over and over again say, "I'm just not creative. I can't do that. Other people are more creative than me." Do you know what? When we were born, we were all given the same amount of creativity. Just some people have learned to express it better than others. Some of us have learned to, go after it. There's a period of time where I didn't believe I was creative until I started moving my energy in a certain way. Our paradigms will even control our effectiveness and our productivity, and it all seems extremely logical to us. It's the logic that we use. And that logic sometimes will interfere with things that we want to go after, even our ability to earn an income. It's like we have this imaginary box around us, and anytime we try and make changes and we start going in the direction of what we want to do, we'll just hit right on that imaginary wall and go right back to the way that we've always done it. Well, just imagine if that wall came down. Imagine how your entire life will begin to change and improve in all these areas of your life. The change will be huge. Not only will it be huge, it'll be permanent. I want to share with you a little bit about my story and how I came into contact with Bob Proctor, who helped me begin to change my own perception and be able to change my whole life. There was a period of time when my husband and I, we were working about 12 hours each in our businesses. We had 2 storefront businesses. So each of us were working 12 hours and we were bringing home between the two of us about $5,000 per month. And if you know anything about raising a family of 3 girls on 5,000, that's not a lot of money here in Canada. And what I was doing at that time was as we were working, both of my parents passed away, and I did not have time to grieve. If I didn't go to work, then I wasn't able to help provide the family lifestyle that we were doing. And so I was really concerned about that. So at the time, I was looking for solutions, and I came across Bob Proctor, and he asked me, "What do I want?" And I remember really struggling with that because I had learned a really great lesson from my father. And that lesson was you have to work really hard for your money. So I had a very big belief about that. And I was working very hard for my money. Another thing, as you know, Bob was asking me what I want, is I grew up in a very religious home. And so I had a lot of beliefs about money, like money is the root of all evil, all rich people are going straight to hell, you can't serve both God and money. And so I was very concerned about asking for more. And if I asked for more, then I wasn't being content. And who needs that? A person who's not content. And so all of these things about having a father who told me that I have to work hard for my money, he did it out of love, and also just learning a lot about religious things that I was taught about money and not being grateful for what I had. And those ideas, when Bob asked me, "What do you want?" I said, "I would like to make a lot of money." He said, "What's a lot?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, why don't you turn your annual income into a monthly income?" I remember my cheeks got all red, and I got very concerned and worried about this whole idea. How could I possibly take a whole year and put it in a month? And he said, "Don't worry about the who or the how." He said, "Write a story as if it's happening." And so I wrote a story out, and I remember thinking, this sort of sounds a bit silly. How can writing out a story do that for me? This feels a little bit like rainbow hearts and unicorn parts. But I remember, okay, I'll play your silly game. And I wrote it out as if it was happening. How would I feel? And I read that story every day. And 2 months later, I turned my annual income into a monthly income. Now, some people will go, "What did you do?" It isn't important what I did. What was more important is that I changed my mind. I changed my perception about myself. And when I was able to do that, then that changed my whole world and my ability to earn an income. Now, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of goals that I was setting at the time. And so I just want to go over 3 types of goals that I've learned about. The first type of goal is an A-type goal, a goal that you already know how to do. So many of us keep doing life the same way. We keep doing things that we already know to do. Do you know what a goal is not to get? A goal is to help you grow, and it's in the growing that you get. So if you keep creating goals that you know how to do, well, life keeps passing you by and you've outgrown the environment. And this is where I feel sometimes people get really, really stuck in life. The next type of goal is a B-type goal. This is what you think you can do. You push yourself a little bit further than you ever have before, and you work hard. You give up on, times with the family and weekends, and you're just grinding it out. You're starting to do things that you've never done before, and it just starts piling up until you're just grinding it out and you give up. This has happened to me as well. But I want to talk to you about the next type of goal, the C-type goal. This is what you really, really want. And you may have tried on a number of occasions to win at it, but you just can't seem to get there. I have been here. But this is a type of goal that is worthy of you. And so what would happen if you could possibly create that goal and live in it? I want to share with you this idea. The opposite of courage is not cowardice. It's actually conformity. It's when we keep going back to the things that we already know how to do, which was precisely what I was doing. I want to go over some levels of awareness as you're changing or as you're growing. As we round this thing up or wind this thing up, I just want to go over these with you. So how aware are you? Let's go over some levels of awareness. The first level of awareness is animal. This is when you just are reacting. I had a dog named Chester, and every time I put food in his bowl, as soon as he heard that food, he would go right there and he would eat the food. I could do it 5 minutes later and he would still come back and eat the food. He wasn't really thinking. He was just reacting to the sound. Sometimes we're a lot like this. We just react to certain situations. We're not even really thinking. The next level of awareness is masses. This is when we're concerned what everyone else is doing. What are you doing? And what are you doing? And what are you doing? Or what do you think? And what do you think? We're so concerned with what everyone else thinks that guess what? We're not thinking. I've spent a lot of time here, and many people have shared with me, they have been here too, where we're so concerned what everyone else thinks that we aren't thinking for ourselves. Let's go to the next level of awareness. Let's go to aspiration. Aspiration is when you want to get out of the masses. You have this desire. You want to do something more than what you're currently doing. And as you kind of put your head up and you say, what could I do? You start looking around. There's so much that's possible that you're like, wow, I can't decide which one to do. And so we just say, forget about it. I'm just going to go back down to the masses and keep doing what I've always been doing. But let's say you made it past aspiration and desire, and now you're at a level of individual expression. This is when you finally feel comfortable with what you're doing and you start telling your friends and family, this is what I'm going to create. And all of a sudden, you know what happens at this level of awareness? Well, who are you to do that? Aren't you just that sandwich lady? Are you educated in this idea? Do you know you have to have a degree in this? And all kinds of things start coming in that undermines your individual expression of yourself because you feel like you have to do it perfect when you first start. And because we feel we can't do it perfect, we give up and we say, you're right. Who am I to do that? And we go right back down to the masses. We're not at a place of wanting to grow and learn. But let's say you made it past aspiration and individual expression, and now we're at a level of discipline. This is where we give ourselves that idea and that command to start going after it. And as we start putting things into place for ourselves, do you know what shows up at this level? Problems start showing up. How do I do this? How do I have a website? How do I attract people? And all of a sudden, all of these things start coming up that you've never had to deal with before. And then rather than asking for help, you try and figure it out on your own. And this is where you just can't solve it. And you just say, I'm just getting roadblock after roadblock. Forget it. I'm just going to go back and do what I've done all the time. So we head back down to the masses. But let's say we made it past aspiration and individual expression and discipline. And now we're at the area of experience where we're finally taking action towards that ideal that we want. You may be in it right now where you're taking action and you're creating all kinds of cause and effects. And you know what shows up at this level of experience? A pitiful return in all that work that you've been doing. And it's so hard because you're not getting the results that you want. And you just keep working at it and grinding with it. And you're not getting the results. And this is where people go right back down to the masses and say, forget it. I've been doing this for 2-3 years and I'm not getting what I want. But I want to tell you about this next level of awareness. This is mastery. This is where you learn to respond and you no longer are reacting at all those levels. This is when it's in your bones. You cannot be swayed by the idea. This is where true growth happens, where you begin to master it. This is where I love to work with people. There was a period of time, however, where I would get to a certain part and certain level, and I would just go right back to the masses. And I did it often enough and frequent enough that I thought, this is just the way that life is, until I began to learn how to master myself. This is one of my favorite quotes by Eric Hoffer because it reminds me that I am on my path. In times of rapid change, it's the learners that inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Oftentimes when I'm talking to people and I'm sharing with them ideas, they'll say, I know, I already know that. Well, it's beyond knowing it. It's now about living it. Knowing it is not enough. It's being able to adapt and learn about yourself as you're making these rapid changes to go after what you want. Going after it is a big decision. And I don't think people really know what it takes to go after it. Well, I want to thank you for coming on to this webinar. You know, I'm hoping you had a shift in your thinking. We've talked about a lot of things over a short period of time. And we've talked about paradigms. We've talked about ABC types of goals, perception, all kinds of things. Maybe you saw something in that reminded you, wow, that's a good thing to think about. Maybe you can see where you're looping, where you get to a certain level of awareness, then you just loop right back down to the masses. You know, it could just be a possible little shift that could be the key to your freedom. You know, I often hear from people, I just want to have my goal right now. And I think many people don't realize is that there are small little shifts that we need to make so that we can bring that into form. I hear people say, I just want ease and flow. I just want it to be easy. I don't want it to be complicated. Well, I can tell you this, the price for ease and flow is an effective awareness. You know, so many people don't understand the true cause to get the effect that you want, and that's a study of you. So I want to thank you for coming on. You know, this is just the first part in our presentation to work with you to find out more about you. And if there's a way that we can help you get on to where you want to go, we definitely want to do that. I just believe there's so much good in the world that people are trying to get to, they're trying to bring out in the world. And if we can help you bring your goal or your dream or your idea to the world, we want to help you with that. I know that you probably already have an appointment set up to speak to the person that brought you in. I want you to make sure and meet with them again because they're going to get some information about you. And I want to be able to meet with you and help you along the way. So thank you for coming on. I look forward to talking with you. Take care.